This is our group project, the midterm project. Our project is all about the student enlistment management. So I am Mark James Ison, and I will present the Student.java class and the Subject.java class. So let's start with student class, which is the parent class in our project. So public class student is the student parent class in the program. So we define the class fields starts with the int ID, private string first name, private string last name, private string course, and the private subject, which is the inherit inherit inherited in the subject.java or the inheritance. So next is the class constructors of the Student.java. The public student default constructor, the public student int ID, string first name, and the string last name. And last is the string course. The int ID is the uh, will store the ID of the student, and the string first name will store the first name of the student. The string last name will store the last name of the student. The string course will store the course inputted by the user on the student. So initial initialization of the superclass constructor. This.id equals id. This first name equals first name. This.last name equals last name. This course equals course. This is the getters of the Student.java. So public int get id return this.id. These getters will get the ID inputted by the user on the student record. Next is the public string get first name. Return this.first name. This string will get the first name of the student record that entered by the user. Next, public string get last name. Return this.last name. So this string will get the last name of the student entered by the user. This is the string that get course. Return this.course, which will get the course inputted by the user. Setters. So setters, public void set id int id. This.id equals id. The public void set first name, string first name. This.first name equals first name. Public void set last name, string last name. This.last name equals last name. Public void set course, string course. This.course equals course. So next is the methods of the Student.java. The first method is the getStudentDetails method. Public string get student details. It will return the student record inputted by the user, this first name and plus this last name and the this.course. Next method is the method to generate and return details of a student, including the student subject. So this method of string get full details, return this get that student details, plus the this that subject that get that subject details. This method will uh, combine the get student details and the get subject details entered by the user. So next is the method to assign a subject to the student. Public void assign subject subject. This that subject equals subject. So this method will assign to the student the subject inputted by the user. Next is the method to display. Public string display student. Return student record. This that gets student details. This method will display the student details entered by the user. Then next is the public string display full details. Return this that get full details. That will display on the above that the get full details. So next we will go to the Subject.java, which is the child class of the student class. So public class subject extends student. So this is the class subject that is the child class of the student Java. So next we declared the class fields private int subject ID, which is the subject ID that will navigate the user in the switch case in the Main.java. So next is the private string subject name. This is the subject name entered by the user to the student. So private int units. Uh, this field will accept the units entered by the user. Then next is the private student. Private student is the inheritance of the Student.java. And next is the private list student. This student equals new array list, which is the for the association of the student Java on the subject Java. Next is the class constructor. Class constructor public subject int subject ID string subject name int units. So this is the constructor of the subject Java that will store the subject ID, the subject name, and the units entered by the user. So next we will go to the getters and setters of the subject Java. First is the public int subject ID. Return this the subject ID. Then next is the public string get subject name. Return this the subject name. This will get the subject name entered by the user. So next is the setters for the subject name. So this will set the inputted data by the user to the subject name. Then last is the public int get units, return units. This will get the units entered by the user. Public void set units is that units will set the inputted units of the user to the Subject.java. So next we'll go to the Subject.java methods. Public string get subject details. Return subject ID number plus this dot subject ID plus subject name plus this dot subject name plus units. So get subject details will return the subject ID, the subject name, and the units entered by the user. Next is the method to generate and return details of a student including the student subjects. So public string get full details. Return subject ID plus this the subject ID plus subject name plus this the subject name plus units plus this units plus student details from the student class plus the this that get student details. This that get student details is uh, from the student class inherited by the subject class. So next is the display subject. This will display the subject info entered by the user. So this will return the subject ID, the subject name, and the number of units. So after subject Java, we will go to the main Java. So public class main. This uh, this class will execute our program. The program is the student engagement management, and this will be discussed by Mr. Christian Roger Leonida.
So, hello, my name is Christian Roger T. Leonida. So, this is the public class main. So, this is the system out print student engagement management. So, this is the input number 0. So, so while the number is not 8, so they're going to be, the input will be choose the number of operation. So in number 1, create a new student record. Number 2, input, create a new subject record. Number 3, input, enlist a subject to a student. Number 4, input, remove the subject from a student. Number 5, display the details of student. Number 6, display all the details of all the student. Number 7, display the student details and is in a selected subject. And the number 8 is exit. So please choose the number, then switch number. Then the first is case, add the student. Case 2, add the subject. Case 3, enlist the student. Case 4, remove the subject. Case 5, display the student. Then case 6 is display the full details. So case 7 is display the student in the selected subject. So and finally case 8 is to exit the system. So this is the add subjects which is going to be discussed by Mr. Ricard. So Mr. Ricard Merit.
Hello, my name is Gerald Bautista. Method for adding subject. Public static void add subject. And the class fields for add subject. Int subject ID is equal to 0. Unit is equal to 0. And string subject name. And in inputting details. System out dot print. Create new subject record. System out dot print. Add subject ID. And subject ID is equal to scan.next int. System out dot print add subject name. Subject name is equal to scan.next. System out dot print add number of units. Units is equal to scan.next int. And adding our object to the list. Subject subject is equal to new subject. Subject ID, subject names, units, list subjects that add. Public static void search subject. Class fields for searching subjects. Int search ID is equal to 0. And inputting details. System out dot print search ID number. System out dot print enter ID number. Search ID is equal to scan.next int. And loop for finding the subject ID in the list. For int I is equal to 0. I is list subjects the size. And if list subject that get that subject ID is equal to search ID. System out dot print list subjects that get that display. For modifying subject, class fields for modifying subject, int subject ID is equal to 0. System out dot print modify a subject. System out dot print enter subject ID to modify. Subject ID is equal to scan.next. Int position is equal to 0. And for loop, for int I is equal to 0, I these subjects that size. And if list subjects that get that subject ID is equal to subject ID position I. And the changing values will discussed by Ricaport Mervin.
Good day, my name is Merwin Ricafort. Next is the changing the values. If the user input a subject ID -1, the the program will say no subject ID found. Else, if the user input a subject ID 1 and so forth, system.out.println change the value. Then subject name, then number of units, and then the system.out.print enter a number. Next, we move on to switch case for changing the value. Case 1, system.out.println enter new subject name, then break. Case 2, system.out.print enter new number of units, and then break. Default
System.out.println invalid break. Next is to removing the subject, integer subject ID, then system.out.println remove a subject, then enter subject ID you want to delete. This is the code for the removing the subject. For int I is equal to 0, um, I less than list subject that size plus plus. If list subject that get I that subject ID is equal to subject ID. List subjects that remove I. Next is to display the subject. If list subject that is empty, system.out.print no record found. Else, for subject list subject, system.out.print the subject will display. We move on to the next presenter for method for creating a student record.
Good day, I am April Kate Bicaldo, and we will start in the line 184. This is where we'll start the method for creating a new student record. This will be the code of block that will ask the use to input the student the use that will ask the user to input the details of a student. And this and first in 180 line 186 to 190, these are the class fields for creating a student record. And then in line 191, inputting details, these are this will print and let the user know that what are the program is asking for. Example, this one in line 193, system.out.println, please add a student ID. This 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 line asks the user to input the ID number of a student, and then the ID equals scan dot next int. This line of code will scan the input of the user, and it will store in the variable ID. Then next, the system.out.println, please enter student first name as the first name of the student. And then the first name equals scan will get the input of the user for what is the first name of the student, and then store it in the first name attribute. And then system.out.println, please enter student last name. It asks the student's last name. And then same with the previous code, which is the who are getting the input of the user, and it will store in the attribute last name. And then lastly, the line that asks the student scores, and then they will store the data about the course of the student in the course attribute. And then the line in the line 202, adding our object for the list, the line 203, which is student equals new student, and then 204 list student that adds close parenthesis, open parenthesis student, and then close parenthesis, and this will compile this group of code, these two code will compile all the inputted details of the student and create a new student object. The next presenter that will explain the enlist student is Leonida.
So hello, this is Leonida. So this is the enlist student. So class field for searching student, int that search that id is equal to 0. Then int that search that id1 is equal to 0. So inputting details, system out print, and this student to a subject. So another system out print, enter a student ID number. So if that position is equal to 0. So look for enlisting the student in a subject. So for that int is equal to 0, then the list student is going to find the size. Then if the list student that get ID is equals to search that ID1, the position is equal to 1. So search value, if the position is equal to -1, system.outprint is going to know student that ID has found. Else student.out.print is going to enlist the details. So system outprint option 1, student ID. Then system outprint option 2, subject now subject name. So int that show value is equal to standard ent. So this is the switch show value. So case 1, system.outprint is going to list the student, get that search that id1 that display the student. So the list of student get the position, then break. Then case 2, system.out.print leads the subject that get search ID that display. Then list subject will get the position, then break. Then if the option is not in the input, the system outprint will be invalid. So next will be display details student, which going to be presented by Mr. Escalona.
Okay, so the next presenter is Mr. Den Michael Viñelas.
So in line 322, it declares public static void display student. If the list student is empty, it will show or it will display system.out.print no record found.
Okay. In line 326 or else, if in the display student in line 327, if in the display student is not empty or it not display the no record found, then the program will go to the line 327 where for students list student, and it will print here in line 328 system.out.println student display student, where it will display the first name and last name and ID number of the student. So the next reporter will be Mr. Jimwell Gumapon to explain the display all details, all students.
So hello, I am Jimwelay Gumapon, and the line that I will report is in 333 line. The public static void display full details. The display full details is where the user display the name, course, and ID of the student. the if list student that is empty, system.out.print no record found. The is empty method is the it works when the the display full details is empty, and it will print the no record found. And if there is an details that the user print, the program will go to the else statement where the Mr. Janry Asansa will report. Janry Asansa.
Allow. Next line is 338. Else if details have record of the student, the program will continue display the full details and for loop. The next is for loop. Student is an inheritant. And line of 340 system.out.print to display full details of the student. Next is reporting is James Wyson.
So the last method is the public static string, string clear one, string input, string type, string clean string. So this method is the for removal of the inputted data of the user in the student record. Same with the public static string clear string input string type in the subject record. This method will remove the inputted data on the subject record in the above add subject method. So this is our midterm project program. The student enlistment management. So thank you for watching and God bless.